again.
By any means necessary. The revolution won't be no rerun, brother. The revolution will be live.
So much of our history is lost. It's up to us to find it.
I'm just going to try to answer one question that reporters have asked me, and that is, why didn't you move when asked? And my answer is, I tell them all the time, history had me glued to the seat.
Who is Claudette Colvin, and why don't you know her name? The year was 1955. Montgomery, Alabama. Rife with racial tension, black people living under the grips of segregation were fed the fuck up. Claudette Colvin was a student at Montgomery's segregated Booker T. Washington High School. She was also a member of the NAACP Youth Council. While she was born and raised in one of Montgomery's poorest neighborhoods, Colvin was a straight-A student with political aspirations. Colvin, whose parents did not own a car, depended on city buses to get to and from school. The Montgomery City Code required that all public transportation be segregated and that bus drivers had the powers of a police officer while in actual charge of any bus for the purposes of carrying out the provisions of the city's code. While operating a bus, drivers were required to provide separate but equal bullshit. Sorry. While operating a bus, drivers were required to provide separate but equal I just keep getting caught up on that part. While operating a bus, drivers were required to provide separate but equal accommodations for white and black passengers by assigning seats. This was accomplished with a line roughly in the middle of the bus separating white passengers in the front of the bus and black passengers in the back. When a black passenger boarded the bus, they had to get on at the front to pay their fare and then get off and reboard the bus through the back door. Ain't that some shit? Okay. On March 2nd, 1955, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin was riding a city bus after school when the bus driver asked her to give up her seat to a white passenger.
And I could hear the white passengers saying, she gotta move, that's the law, she gotta move. And I felt like this is my time to take a stand for justice. Most people ask, why didn't you get up when the bus driver asked you to get up? I tell them, I could not move because history had me glued to the seat. And they say, how is that? And I said, well, it felt like Sojourner Truth's hands were pushing me down on one shoulder, and Harriet Tubman's hands were pushing me down on the other shoulder.
After refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger, Claudette was arrested on several charges, including violating the city's segregation laws. Terrified, 15-year-old Claudette sat in jail for several hours. She was later bailed out by her pastor, who told her, "You brought the revolution to Montgomery." Her and her family stayed up all night out of fear of retaliation.
That's the reason I said history, the history of how we were treated, had me glued to the seat, and I wasn't going to move that day. Nothing. I refused. They said, oh my God, you refused? I refused to walk off the bus. So two policemen, they manhandled and pulled me off the bus, put me in the patrolman car and handcuffed me.
Colvin was convicted of 3 charges in juvenile court. Upon appeal in federal court, 2 of the 3 charges were dropped. The charge for violating the city's segregation laws, as well as the charge for disturbing the peace. However, she was still charged with assaulting an officer. For a time, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, considered using Claudette's case to challenge the city's segregation laws, but passed once it was revealed that Claudette was pregnant. They believed a 15-year-old unwed mother would attract too much negative attention in a public legal battle. Once in court, Claudette opposed the segregation laws by declaring herself not guilty. The court, however, ruled against her and sentenced her to probation. Despite receiving what was considered by many a light sentence, in the court of public opinion, the judgment was a lot harsher. She was branded a troublemaker. The former straight-A student had to drop out of college, and she had trouble finding a job because of her reputation.
Excuse me, I didn't go back to school the next day. I was too traumatized. Oh, but when I did go back, the parents had, the other parents, not my parents, but the student parents had convinced them, oh my God, that Claudette Colvin, that girl is crazy. Stay away from her.
Claudette did, however, become one of the plaintiffs in Browder v. Gale, which challenged city bus segregation in Montgomery, Alabama as unconstitutional. 9 months after Claudette refused to give up her seat to a white passenger, another black woman would follow in her footsteps. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger. Rosa Parks' arrest and trial led to the Montgomery bus boycott. On December 5th, 1955, the day of Rosa Parks' trial, members of Montgomery's black community were asked to stay off city buses in protest of her arrest. They were encouraged to either stay home or take a cab or walk to work or school. It was believed that with most of the black community not riding the bus longer, the boycott might be successful. Remember, 2/3 of bus riders prior to the boycott were black. So to have black people almost entirely not riding the bus hit the city exactly where it counted, their wallet. In the future, we'll discuss the Montgomery bus boycott more in depth on this channel, so you have to subscribe to get that info. So they rallied around Rosa Parks and immediately made her the face of the movement. This was the event that black leaders felt was needed to unify the black community to fight against the unjust treatment they were receiving. So what were the differences between Claudette Colvin and Rosa Parks? Let's see, Claudette was 15 years old, pregnant, and unwed. Then there's Rosa Parks, who was 42, married, and she just so happened to be the secretary to the NAACP president at the time. And we have to state the obvious. Claudette was dark-skinned and Rosa was light-skinned. And colorism has always been a thing and has always affected dark-skinned black women the most. This was about optics, and as I said earlier, black people were fed the fuck up.
To dramatize this blatant injustice and to demand that the federal government not put a cent in this city unless it decides to face the realities of desegregation.
So black leadership were building a movement, and what they didn't have in Claudette, they had in Rosa. Someone with no moral hang-ups and someone who could appeal to the sensibilities of people nationwide. Just to get a sense of how much the racial tensions were boiling over and the subsequent work that was being done to challenge institutional racism and the organizing that was happening, think about this. The same lawyer, Fred Gray, represented both Claudette and Rosa in their cases against the city, as well as represented Claudette and the 3 other plaintiffs in Browder v. Gale. So this was an organized, concerted effort to challenge Montgomery's segregation laws as unconstitutional.
And everybody know about Mrs. Parks, and everybody know about Dr. King and some others, but very few people know about Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old African-American, and I never tell the story about Montgomery without mentioning Claudette. It's been almost a one-man crusade. She was coming home that day, changed buses on the square downtown, and boarded Capitol Heights bus. Same place 9 months later, Mrs. Parks boarded Cleveland Avenue bus. Ms. Parks went up Montgomery Street. She went down Commerce Street for 1 block to Commerce and Bibb. And she was asked to get up and give her seat to a white man. And she didn't get up. And she didn't walk off. They literally drug Claudette off the bus. I represented Claudette in the probate court of Montgomery County. And we went to went to bat for Claudette.
Browder v. Gale made his way through the courts. On June 5th, 1956, the United States District Court for the Middle District of Alabama issued a ruling declaring the state of Alabama and Montgomery's laws mandating public bus segregation as unconstitutional. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, who upheld the district court decision. And on December 20th, 1956, after declining to reconsider, the Supreme Court ordered Montgomery and the state of Alabama to end bus segregation permanently. This also marked the end of the over year-long bus boycott. In the time following her arrest and public trials, Claudette struggled to have a normal life. So in 1958, Colvin moved to New York City, where she had a second son and worked as a nurse's aide at a Manhattan nursing home until her retirement in 2004. This is very similar to Rosa Parks, who also struggled after her arrest, including losing her job, and just like Claudette, chose to leave the South, relocating to Detroit, Michigan. When we think of Black history, the Civil Rights Movement, we don't think of Claudette Colvin. She's been mostly left out and hardly mentioned. She played a vital role in the fight to end segregation in Montgomery. Her lawyer, Fred Gray, said, "Claudette gave all of us moral courage. If she had not done what she did, I am not sure that we would have been able to mount the support for Mrs. Parks. At 15 years old, she did bring the revolution to Montgomery." So, who is Claudette Colvin? Much like Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, she is a true heroine, an icon. And we have no choice but to stand this queen.
I'm just going to try to answer one question that reporters have asked me, and that is, why did you move when asked? And my answer is, I tell them all the time, history had me glued to the seat. And you know what they say, now how is that? Because most of the teachers felt that we had been left out of the American history. And only 2 men was in the encyclopedia, and that was George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington. There was no history books, no books in our library. Maybe other cities, but not Montgomery. And we discussed all the injustices that was perpetrated on the Black community in Montgomery City. And then we discussed the heroes. And amongst them, some of the heroes, 2 of my favorite were females. That was Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. That's why I said it felt like Harriet Tubman was pushing me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth was pushing me down on the other shoulder. I was embraced spiritually by the struggle and the bravery of these 2 women. So I said they picked the wrong day to pick on me, the bus motorman.
Remember, so much of our history is lost. It's up to us to find it. I'm King Ryan, and this has been Black and Found.
The revolution will not be televised. Will not be televised. Will not be televised. Will not be televised. The revolution won't be no rerun, brother. The revolution will be live.
King
Ryan.
First of his name.
Long may he reign.
Long may he reign.